Thank you. I've been asked to talk about nutrition, which is my favorite topic, under rapid urbanization. It's good to come on day 3 of the conference because a lot has been said already, or a lot of the background has been laid out. So I don't need to repeat to go in length in terms of the fact that we have a problem or a positive problem of urbanization. Urbanization has accelerated since the 1950s very rapidly. We currently have about 54% of the population living in urban areas, and we expect that to go all the way to 67% by 2050. So this has been mentioned, as well as the fact that we expect that most of the growth between now and 2050 will happen in Asia and Africa, and particularly in Africa. Both areas will add 2.8 billion people to cities. So this is not a small matter. And as I said, we've talked about malnutrition in all its form, the statistics about it. I will not go over this again, but it's important to mention that urban areas are particularly affected by the multiple different burdens of malnutrition than we have. This is because there is still some undernutrition that is persistent and stubborn in urban areas, and at the same time there's the coexistence of very rapidly increasing problems of overweight and obesity. This is an example from India. You see the blue bar is rural, the red is urban slums, and the green is urban non-slums. And on the left side you see the prevalence of underweight in women. And you can see the gradient from rural, where there's more underweight, to urban slum, there's less, and even less in non-slum area. But the very rapid or the very large gradients in terms of overweight, how much overweight there is in women from the time we go from the rural areas to urban areas, urban slums and urban non-slums. In all, if you look at the red bars, in urban areas, in urban slums, about half of women have either underweight or overweight. So there's a very large proportion of the population that's malnourished. I also wanted to bring an example from West Africa, an analysis of 16 countries. Here, the slide is slightly different. What you have is the multiple lines are by income quintile. So the first 2 sets of columns are underweight, and the other 2 are overweight. Again, you see that there's a gradient by economic status. So the richer people are, the less underweight they have. Again, those are women. And urban is the first bar, and rural is the second one. So in both areas, income affects the reduction in terms of underweight, but it goes much faster with income when you look at overweight and obesity, and especially in urban areas. So that's what I was saying by the fact that we really do have the coexistence of a very severe problem of multiple forms of malnutrition. We've talked about diets many times during the conference. And we've mentioned that diets have been changing rapidly. There's a nutrition transition. The pictures on the right side show what's going on. You have at the bottom some food that is fried. This is possibly some animal pieces that people eat normally, but now they're frying them and they sell them in the street. Then you have the local type of fast food, and then you have the multinational Pizza Hut. I just wanted to provide a brief description of what we mean by nutrition transition in case some people were not fully aware of it. So it's the change from the traditional diets that were rich in coarse grains, staple cereals, and pulses to diets that are more diverse, have often more animal source foods, but often in excess, and have also more fruit and vegetables, but they also have all of the other products that are processed, ultra-processed, and that very often contain excess contents of salt, sugar, and oils, what we call processed and ultra-processed foods. So why are urban diets changing? Why are urban diets a problem? There's a combination of supply and demand factors, and for supply factors, we know that globalization and trade liberalization have changed the urban food environment. It's interesting to see Bangkok. It's a typical place where everything goes in terms of food available, from the big supermarkets to the informal vendors to the fast food cooked in the street to the formal fast food. So the type and nature of food available, accessible, and the aggressive marketing of certain types of food, especially the ultra-processed food, is what characterizes the urban food environment. And there are lots of purchasing options, as I mentioned. There's also the lifestyle of people, the changes in income that affect what they need to purchase. For example, convenience is a very big issue in urban areas because people work outside the home, they may commute for long hours to go back home. They just don't have time to cook, and very often they don't even have, especially in slum, the facilities to cook at home. So there's a lot of eating out and eating fast foods already prepared, which affects the quality of their diets overall. This was not supposed to look like that. The trends in sales. So we're going to move to the ultra-processed foods, which you've heard about them in the few days that we've been here. And again, I wanted to show the differences by countries that are at a high income versus those that are low and middle income. So this is the changes in the sales in Asian countries that have a high income. And you can see that it's kind of plateaued at a high level. They consume quite a large amount of these foods in terms of kilograms per capita per year. But when you look at the lower and middle income countries, this is going up, and this is going up very fast. It's at low levels right now, but you see Pakistan is on the right side, India is there as well. And you can see that they're still at very low levels of consumption, but we know that the industry knows how to promote these foods, and it will go faster than it even went in countries where it's already happening. The reason why we care about these processed foods is that they do have health and nutritional, they can do damage, in other words, but because they tend to be very tasty, addictive. People exaggerate, eat too much of them. They're fast, they're easy to consume. And so what I'm showing here is the relationship between energy intake from these kinds of ultra-processed food and intake of added sugar. And you can see that as the energy intake from those food increases, there's a very rapid rise in the energy coming from added sugars. These foods contain added sugar everywhere. Even the salty ones contain a lot of sugar, and they contain salt, and they contain oil. The WHO recommendation is the red bar is the WHO recommendation of what percentage of our energy should come from sugar, and it's about 10%. And you can see that as soon as you eat just a little more of those processed food, you consume an awful lot of sugar, way too much, increasing the risk of diabetes. And you can see on the right side the other bad part of the story, which is that as energy from these foods increase, the percentage of energy from protein goes way down. And that is an aspect that causes the double burden. You have micronutrient deficiency, protein deficiency possibly, and too much sugar and too much fat. And here's a slide that shows roughly the relationship between countries where there's a lot of availability of these products and obesity. And those are all associations. They're not the best data we have, but certainly there's a sign, a warning sign that consuming too much of these food is just not healthy. And we should curb this and not necessarily change so much the content of these food, but just eat less of them and eat more of normal, less processed food. In conclusion, in urban areas, and I haven't mentioned that before, but that's a conclusion, the most accessible, affordable, and convenient diets are often the most unhealthy. So these processed food I didn't mention, but they are not only palatable and all of that, but they're often very cheap. They're cheaper than consuming a healthy diet made of fresh fruit and vegetables and decent or limited amounts of animal source foods. Poor diets are associated with all forms of malnutrition. This is the common driver, as Corinna Hawkes mentioned yesterday, and it's also the common solution. But for now, it's been mostly a common driver, that poor diets drive undernutrition, deficiencies in micronutrients, and overweight and obesity, and risk of diet-related non-communicable diseases. So we should propose an accelerator for urbanization, or for approaches to redirect the urban food environments towards healthier diets and to achieve double duty. By double duty, we mean interventions and actions that address both the undernutrition problems and the overnutrition problems at the same time. And we should do that by focusing on both on the supply and the demand side, which are equally important, on the supply side, making healthy foods and diets available, accessible, affordable, and desirable. Very often, the traditional diets has lost its desirability, and people just want to eat the modern diets. And we should really do a lot more on the demand side. We are not as good as the industry in promoting healthy diets. We should learn and use approaches that are much more effective at behavior change communication, and we should invest more in education, and we should educate people about nutrition from the time they're in primary school and all the way until they are adults. Thank you.